Blood drips onto sawdust as 5 drunk cowboys corner Sarah Manning in the Red Rock Saloon. Their leader, a brute named Jake Cooper, has already broken 3 of her fingers. His men laugh as she cradles her shattered hand. They think they own the place now. They think nobody will dare stop them. They're about to learn how wrong they are. The Red Rock isn't just another frontier saloon. It belongs to Sheriff Thomas Reid. 15 years ago, he laid down one rule in Redemption Springs: touch his people, and he'll put you in the ground. His notches tell the story. 27 outlaws who thought they could break his law. By sunrise, these cowboys will either be in chains or they'll join the bones bleaching in Boot Hill. This isn't just another bar fight. This is how 5 men learn the true price of crossing the wrong lawman. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 6 hours. Earlier, Sarah Manning wiped down the bar of the Red Rock Saloon, her movements practiced and efficient. Late afternoon sun slanted through the saloon's windows, catching dust motes in amber beams. The familiar scents of tobacco, whiskey, and leather filled the air as regular patrons settled in for the evening. "Miss Sarah," old Pete called from his usual corner table, "reckon we might get a fresh bottle?" The elderly miner had been nursing the same whiskey since noon, more interested in conversation than drinking. Sarah knew his habits well. 15 years of serving drinks taught you to read people. "Coming right up, Pete," she replied, selecting a bottle of the cheaper stuff he preferred. As she crossed the wooden floor, her boots clicking against worn planks, she noted 2 tables of cowboys she didn't recognize. Trail dust still clung to their clothes, their faces sunburned and weather-beaten. New arrivals always meant staying alert. Behind the bar, Tom the bartender polished glasses with methodical care. At 60, he'd been running bars longer than Sarah had been alive. "Cattle drivers," he muttered as she passed. "Came in with the lazy S-drive. Been in town 3 days, spending big." Sarah nodded, filing away the information. The Red Rock ran smooth because they paid attention to details. Sheriff Reid insisted on it, though few knew he owned the place. To most folks in Redemption Springs, the Red Rock was just another saloon, albeit a well-run one. The evening crowd began filtering in as shadows lengthened outside. Ranch hands, fresh from work, miners done with their shifts, townspeople looking for a drink or a game of cards. Sarah knew most by name, knew their stories and troubles. The Red Rock wasn't just a saloon, it was the heart of Redemption Springs. "Evening, Miss Manning." Deputy Wilson tipped his hat as he entered, making his usual early evening rounds. His presence was part of the routine, a subtle reminder of law and order. He'd stop by again later, ensuring the night stayed peaceful. Sarah checked her timepiece. Almost 6. Martha would be arriving soon to help with the evening rush. The young woman was new to saloon work, but eager to learn. Sarah had taken her under wing, teaching her the same lessons she'd learned years ago: how to handle drunks without escalation, how to spot trouble before it started, how to maintain dignity in a profession many looked down on. At the poker table, Judge Henderson dealt another hand to the regulars. The game had been running steady for 3 hours, stakes modest, tempers cool. Sarah appreciated players like them. They understood the Red Rock's reputation for clean games and civil behavior. The cattle drivers at the corner table grew louder as they ordered another round. Sarah studied them carefully as she served nearby tables. 5 men, trail-worn but well-armed. Their leader, a broad-shouldered man with a scarred face, watched her movements with predatory interest. "Quite a woman," she heard him say to his companions. "Don't make them like that in Texas." His words carried the slight slur of someone working hard on getting drunk. Sarah had heard similar comments countless times. They didn't bother her anymore. Tom caught her eye, a silent question. She shook her head slightly. "No need for intervention," Yet the Red Rock had its own rhythm for handling trouble. Sheriff Reid had established the rules years ago. Give people room to choose better behavior, but be ready when they don't. Martha arrived as the sun dipped below the horizon, bringing cooler air through the batwing doors. Sarah spent a few minutes getting her settled, reviewing the evening's duties. The young woman's hands shook slightly as she arranged glasses. "Steady," Sarah murmured. "Remember what I taught you. You're in control here, not them. Any real trouble? That's what Tom and the deputies are for." The cattle drivers ordered another round, their voices carrying over the general din. Their leader, Sarah had heard one of them call him Cooper, was telling stories about the trail. Drive. His words grew cruder with each drink, drawing disapproving glances from the regulars. Sarah moved through the growing crowd with practiced ease, keeping track of multiple conversations, monitoring drink levels, watching for signs of trouble. The Red Rock operated like a well-oiled machine, each person knowing their role. Even the town drunk, swaying slightly by the bar, knew better than to cause real problems. As night settled over Redemption Springs, more patrons arrived. The piano player started up a lively tune, and the energy in the room shifted. Sarah noticed Cooper watching her again, his eyes harder now, whiskey burning away whatever manners he might have started with. She'd seen that look before. Some men thought a saloon girl was fair game, especially after a few drinks. They didn't understand that the Red Rock was different. Sheriff Reid had made sure of that, though he rarely visited the place himself. His rules were clear. Everyone deserved respect, regardless of their profession. Tom moved closer to her end of the bar, his movements casual but purposeful. He'd spotted Cooper's attention too. The old bartender had broken up more fights than most men had seen, though you wouldn't know it from his gentle demeanor. Sarah checked her timepiece again. 8 o'clock. The night was young, and experience told her it might be a long one. Cooper and his men showed no signs of slowing their drinking, and their jokes had turned mean-spirited. She caught Martha's eye, silently warning her to stay clear of their table. Judge Henderson's poker game continued undisturbed. The players focused on their cards. The regulars created a buffer of normalcy, their presence a reminder of how things usually ran in the Red Rock. But Sarah had learned long ago that routine could shatter in an instant. Outside, a cool breeze carried the sounds of horses and wagon wheels, reminders of the town beyond the saloon's walls. Redemption Springs was growing, attracting more travelers, more opportunities, and more trouble. The Red Rock stood as a testament to civilization's advance, a place where hard men could find comfort without succumbing to their worst instincts. Usually, Sheriff Thomas Reid's morning rounds always started at dawn. He'd developed the habit 15 years ago when he first pinned on the badge, and Redemption Springs had come to set its clock by his steady footsteps. The morning sun cast long shadows as he walked the dusty streets, his spurs making a gentle rhythm against the wooden sidewalks. At 52, Reid moved with the easy grace of a man who'd spent his life in the saddle. His gun belt rode low and worn, the Colt's handle polished, smooth from years of use. "Morning, Sheriff," Mason called from his general store as he swept the boardwalk. Reid tipped his hat, noting the new shipment of goods being unloaded. The town was growing, bringing new opportunities and new troubles. "Any word on those cattle drivers?" Reid asked, pausing by the store's entrance. He'd heard about the Lazy S crew arriving 3 days ago. Mason's face darkened. "Mean bunch. Ran the Williams girl out of the Golden Spur yesterday. Owner was too yellow to stop them." Reid nodded slowly, filing away the information. The Golden Spur was everything the Red Rock wasn't. Cheap whiskey, cheaper women, and an owner who cared more about profits than people. Still, nobody deserved to be run out of town by trail trash. He continued his rounds, exchanging greetings with townspeople preparing for the day. To most, he was just the steady presence that kept the peace. Few knew he owned the Red Rock, and that's how he wanted it. A sheriff couldn't show favoritism even to his own business. Deputy Wilson met him outside the jail, young and eager as always. "Quiet night, sir. Couple drunks in the cells, sleeping it off. Those cattle drivers give you any trouble?" "Not yet. But Cooper, their trail boss, he's got a reputation. 3 warrants out of Texas, nothing that stuck." Reid had expected as much. Men like Cooper were drawn to frontier towns, thinking the law was weaker here. They usually learned different one way or another. He checked in at the bank, the telegraph, office, the courthouse, everything in its place, everything in order. Reid had built this peace one day at a time, enforcing the law with quiet determination and deadly accuracy when needed. His last stop was always the Red Rock, though he rarely entered during business hours. Sarah managed the place better than he ever could, turning what had once been just another rough saloon into something respectable. Through the window, he watched her directing the morning cleaning, efficient and dignified as always. She'd come west 7 years ago, looking for a fresh start. Reid had recognized something in her, the same steel he saw in his own mirror every morning. "Whole town's talking about Cooper's bunch," Deputy Wilson said, falling into step beside him. "Way they treated that Williams girl." Reid's jaw tightened. He'd built Redemption Springs into something better than that. Here, a woman could walk the streets safely, work an honest job without fear. Even saloon girls had the law's protection, his protection. "Keep an eye on them," he ordered. "First sign of real trouble." "Yes, sir." Wilson understood. Reid's reputation wasn't built on violence, but on the certainty of consequences for those who pushed too far. Back in his office, Reid cleaned his Colt with practiced care. 27 notches marked its grip, each one a man who'd chosen the hard way. He wasn't proud of the number, but he wasn't ashamed either. Sometimes peace required a steady hand and a clear understanding of the price of crossing the line. The morning passed with routine duties, paperwork, complaints, the 1,000 small tasks that kept a growing town in order. But his mind kept returning to Cooper and his crew. Men like that, full of trail dust and whiskey, looking to prove something. They were trouble waiting to happen. He'd considered warning them directly, making it clear how things worked in Redemption Springs. But experience had taught him that some men had to learn the hard way. If Cooper and his bunch were those kind of men, well, Boot Hill had room for a few more crosses. Jake Cooper and his boys hit Redemption Springs like a dust storm, loud, mean, and leaving mess wherever they went. By mid-afternoon, they'd already been thrown out of 2 saloons, leaving broken furniture and bruised pride in their wake. "Town's getting soft," Cooper spat, leading his crew down the main street. 3 months pushing cattle had left him raw-edged and looking for something to break. The scar running down his face pulled tight as he sneered at passing townspeople. "Ain't like Texas. Everyone here's too damn polite." Bill Hawkins, his right hand, laughed darkly. "That Williams girl wasn't so polite when we showed her what real cowboys are like." At 25, Bill was the youngest of the crew, with something to prove and mean ways of proving it. The other 3, Mike, Dutch, and Scratchy Pete, followed like wolves in formation. They'd ridden together for 2 years, building a reputation that made decent folks cross the street when they passed. "Heard tell of another saloon," Dutch offered. "Red Rock, supposed to be real fancy-like." Cooper's eyes narrowed at a passing woman who hurried to avoid them. "Fancy, huh? Reckon they need someone to take them down a peg." His hand brushed the gun at his hip, a habit that had left 3 men dead in El Paso last spring. They stopped, outside the Red Rock, studying the well-maintained building. Through the windows, they could see Sarah Manning directing the afternoon preparations. Cooper's face twisted into something ugly. "Well, boys," he drawled, "looks like we found ourselves a new place to get acquainted with." His crew chuckled, understanding his meaning. But first, let's get warmed up proper. They headed to the Golden Spur instead, where the owner's fear made the whiskey flow freely. Cooper kept watching the street, noting the deputy's regular passes. Something about the law here bothered him. Too organized, too confident. Sheriff's got a reputation, Scratchy Pete mentioned, already slurring his words. Heard he's put down 27 men. Ain't met a lawman yet couldn't be handled, Cooper replied, but his eyes stayed hard. He'd crossed paths with serious law before, learned to smell it like approaching rain. This town had it, and it set his teeth on edge. As the afternoon wore on, their mood darkened with drink. Cooper's thoughts kept returning to the Red Rock, to Sarah Manning's dignified bearing. Women like that stirred something mean in him, the need to show them their place. Time we paid that fancy place a visit, he announced finally, standing unsteadily. His crew grinned, recognizing the violence in his voice. Show them how real men handle their drinking. They left the Golden Spur owner trembling, his saloon in shambles. Cooper paused in the street, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. In the dying light, his shadow stretched long and dark, like the promise of trouble to come. "Gonna be a real interesting night, boys," he said, leading them toward the Red Rock. Real interesting indeed. The Red Rock's bat-wing doors crashed open as Cooper and his crew shouldered their way inside. Conversation died like a candle in wind. Sarah Manning's hand paused mid-motion, whiskey bottle suspended above a glass, as she measured the threat. "Well, ain't this fancy?" Cooper announced, voice cutting through the silence. His boys spread out, instinctively taking control of the room's key positions. "Mighty fine place you got here, ma'am." Sarah set the bottle down carefully. "Welcome to the Red Rock, gentlemen. We serve anyone who can behave civilly." Her emphasis on the last word was subtle but clear. Cooper's scarred face twisted. "Civil? Boys, she thinks we ain't civil." He stalked to the bar, intentionally bumping a patron's chair. 5 whiskeys, the good stuff, not that piss water they serve down the street. Tom moved to pour, but Cooper's hand shot out, grabbing Sarah's wrist. "No, the lady serves us." The room's tension ratcheted higher. Regular patrons began quietly leaving, recognizing the signs of coming trouble. Judge Henderson's poker game dissolved, players palming derringers as they departed. "Take your hand off me," Sarah said quietly, steel in her voice. "Now." Cooper's grip tightened. "Or what, pretty lady? Gonna call the law? Ain't that what happened at the Golden Spur?" His crew laughed, spreading further through the room. "Didn't help that Williams girl much, did it?" Sarah's free hand moved beneath the bar, where Tom kept a shotgun. Cooper jerked her forward, off balance. None of that. Boys, check behind the bar. Make sure our new friends ain't getting any ideas." Dutch and Scratchy Pete vaulted the bar. Tom backed away, hands raised, as they found and removed the shotgun. Bill Hawkins stationed himself by the door, while Mike began clearing tables, shoving remaining patrons toward the exit. "Now then," Cooper pulled Sarah closer, whiskey breath hot on her face. "Let's discuss how things gonna work here tonight." Martha appeared from the kitchen, froze at the scene before her. Sarah caught her eye, gave a tiny shake of her head. The young woman retreated, hopefully to fetch help. "Way I see it," Cooper continued, "this place needs new management. Someone to show it how a real saloon operates." His free hand traced Sarah's jaw. "Someone to teach fancy women their proper place." Sarah remained still, calculating odds, remembering Sheriff Reid's training. Wait for the right moment. Don't escalate unless necessary. But in Cooper's eyes she saw something worse than ordinary trouble. She saw a man looking to break things. "Last chance," she warned. "Leave now while you can." Cooper's response was a backhand that sent her stumbling. "Ain't going nowhere, lady. Night's just getting started." He turned to his men. "Lock those doors. Anyone tries coming in." He drew his finger across his throat. Outside, the sun had set completely. Through the windows, Sarah saw Martha running toward the sheriff's office. But Reid was making evening rounds on the other side of town. Help would take time she might not have. Cooper grabbed a bottle, took a long pull. You know what happened to that Williams girl?" He advanced on Sarah. "She thought she was better than us too. Thought being proper made her special." The bottle shattered against the bar. "Learned different, didn't she, boys?" His crew's laughter had an ugly edge. They'd done this before, Sarah realized. This wasn't random trouble. This was their entertainment. "Got all night to teach you the same lesson," Cooper said, reaching. For her again. "Ain't nobody gonna stop us this time." Sarah backed away, looking for options. The rear door was blocked. Windows too small. 5 armed men, drunk and vicious, looking to hurt someone. She'd handled trouble before, but this was different. This was predatory. "Actually," she said, voice steady despite her racing heart, "someone will stop you." Cooper's face darkened. "That a threat, woman?" "No." Sarah stood her ground. "That's a promise. One you're going to regret testing." The first punch caught her by surprise, snapping her head back. Cooper's rings left fire across her cheek. Through ringing ears, she heard his crew cheering him on. "Promises," Cooper spat, grabbing her collar. "Only promise here is what's going to happen when I'm done teaching you your place." Behind him, Sarah saw Tom trying to edge toward the door. Bill Hawkins slammed the old bartender back with his rifle butt. "Stay put, old man. You'll get your turn." Blood trickled from Sarah's split lip. She'd finally found what she was looking for. Real fear. These men weren't just troublemakers. They were genuine predators, and they'd chosen the wrong prey. Time to show them why. Martha ran through darkening streets, her heart pounding against her ribs. Deputy Wilson was just turning onto Main Street when she reached him, gasping for breath. Red Rock. Cooper and his men. "They've got Sarah." Wilson's young face hardened. He'd seen the aftermath at the Golden Spur, knew what these men were capable of. "Get to the sheriff's office. Tell Reid exactly what's happening. I'll handle this until he arrives." Inside the Red Rock, Sarah touched her split lip, tasting copper. Cooper loomed over her, enjoying his moment of power. The other patrons were gone now, leaving only Tom watching helplessly from where Bill Hawkins held him. "Deputy's probably coming," Scratchy Pete warned, peering through a window. Cooper sneered. "Good. Been wanting to show this town's law what real men look like." He grabbed Sarah's arm. "Ain't that right, lady?" The saloon's door opened, Deputy Wilson silhouetted against the night. His hand rested near his gun, but didn't draw. 5 against 1. Those weren't winning odds. "Evening, gentlemen." Wilson's voice was steady. "Think it's time you moved on?" "Think again, boy." Cooper's grip tightened on Sarah's arm. "We're just getting comfortable, ain't we, boys?" His crew spread, out hands near weapons. Wilson remained still, buying time. "Miss Manning, you all right?" "She's fine," Cooper answered. "Just learning some manners. Now run along, deputy. Grown folks are talking." Wilson took one step forward. "Can't do that. This is your last warning. Let her go and clear out." Cooper's laugh was ugly. "Or what? You gonna take all of us?" He shoved Sarah aside, focusing on Wilson. "Been a while since I killed me a lawman. Texas Rangers got real upset about the last one." Sarah caught Tom's eye, saw him glance toward the hidden derringer under the bar counter. If she could reach... "Mister," Wilson said quietly, "you really don't want to do this. Not here, not in this town." "Already doing it, boy." Cooper's hand moved to his gun. "Question is, you got the sand to try stopping us?" The tension stretched like a bowstring. Wilson knew he should wait for Reid, but Sarah's bruised face demanded immediate action. His hand inched closer to his. "Revolver, last chance," he warned. "Don't make this worse than it is." Cooper's eyes glittered with malice. Too late for that, law dog. Way too late. Sarah saw his muscles tense, knew what was coming. "Wilson, don't!" The warning came too late. Cooper drew with snake-like speed, his first shot catching Wilson high in the shoulder. The deputy staggered but managed to return fire, winging Dutch, before Hawkins' rifle butt caught him in the back of the head. "Drag him inside," Cooper ordered as Wilson crumpled. "Don't want folks seeing him just yet." He turned back to Sarah, violence written clear on his face. "Now then, where were we?" Outside, Martha finally reached the sheriff's office. But Reid wasn't there. He was across town, unaware his deputy lay bleeding on the Red Rock's floor. Cooper grabbed Sarah's hair, jerking her close. "Seems we got ourselves a real party now. Got us a saloon, got us some entertainment, even got us a pet lawman to play with." Sarah met his eyes, refusing to show fear. "You have no idea what you've just started." "Oh, I know exactly what I started." Cooper's grin was wolf-like. "Question is, how's it gonna end?" The night was young, and things were about to get much worse. News travels fast in a frontier town. Within minutes of Wilson going down, a crowd gathered in the darkened street outside the Red Rock. Judge Henderson had organized armed citizens at both ends of the block, keeping people back while watching the saloon's windows. Inside, Cooper paced like a caged mountain lion, occasionally kicking Wilson's unconscious form. The deputy's shoulder wound bled slowly, staining the sawdust floor. Tom had managed to stem the worst of it while pretending to check if Wilson was dead. "Getting crowded out there," Scratchy Pete muttered, nursing his whiskey. The crew had spread through the saloon, drinking heavily, their earlier bravado shifting toward something darker. "Let 'em watch," Cooper snarled. He grabbed another bottle, taking a long pull. "Been meaning to give this town a show anyway." Sarah stood behind the bar, every muscle tense. They'd tied her hands after Wilson went down, but left her able to serve drinks. Dutch's arm, where Wilson's bullet had creased him, was wrapped in a bar towel. "Might have picked the wrong saloon, Jake," Dutch said quietly. "Wrong town, too," Cooper rounded on him. "You getting yellow, after everything we've been through?" He gestured at Wilson with his bottle. "Already shot us a lawman. Ain't no going back now." Outside, Martha finally found Sheriff Reid making rounds near the church. His face turned to granite as she gasped out the story. "Wilson's been shot?" His hand moved unconsciously to his gun. "Yes, sir, Cooper did it. They've got Sarah and Tom hostage." Reid's eyes narrowed. "Get Doc Matthews. Tell him to be ready." He turned toward Main Street, his spurs ringing with each step. "And Martha, spread the word. Anyone who can handle a gun, I want them watching those windows." Back in the saloon, Sarah caught Tom's eye. The old bartender gave an almost imperceptible nod toward the hidden compartment under the bar. Reid's private gun safe was there, if she could only reach it. "More whiskey," Cooper demanded, shoving his empty bottle at her. As she turned to get it, his hand shot out, grabbing her arm. "Getting awful quiet, lady. Lost that fighting spirit already?" Sarah met his gaze. "Just wondering if you know whose saloon this really is." Cooper's face darkened. He jerked her closer, his free hand tracing the bruise forming on her cheek. "Don't much care. Way I see it, possession's 9/10 of the law." His crew laughed, but there was an edge to it now. They were starting to realize they might be trapped. "Speaking of law," Bill Hawkins called from his window position. "Got movement out there, lots of it." Cooper shoved Sarah aside, stalking to the window. Armed townspeople had taken positions in doorways and allies. This wasn't the usual crowd of gawkers. These were men who knew how to handle trouble. "Whole damn town's out there," Scratchy Pete said, voice trembling slightly. "Maybe we should..." "Should what?" Cooper rounded on him. "Run? Beg?" His hand cracked across Pete's face. "We ain't running. We ain't begging. We're going to show these nice folks exactly what happens when they push Jake Cooper too far." He grabbed Sarah again, dragging her toward the window. "Might start with this one. Show 'em we mean business." A voice cut through the night, steady and cold as mountain creek water. "Cooper!" The crowd parted as Sheriff Reid stepped into the street, moonlight gleaming off his badge. He moved with the easy grace of a man who'd faced down death before and wasn't impressed by the experience. "Got yourself in a real bad spot," Reid continued. "But there's still a way out that doesn't end with Boot Hill." Cooper pressed Sarah against the window frame, making sure Reid could see her clearly. "Got me a real nice spot right here, lawman. Got your deputy bleeding out too. Way I see it, you're the one needs to be careful." Reid's voice remained steady. "Last chance, Cooper. Let them go. Come out peaceful. Face the law proper." Or what? Cooper's laugh was sharp-edged. You gonna shoot through the lady here? Through your own deputy? Son, Reid's hand rested near his gun. You really don't want to know what I'm gonna do. Cooper jerked Sarah away from the window, his whiskey-soaked mind churning with rage. Outside, Reid's challenge hung in the air like gun smoke. The crowd had grown larger, armed citizens taking positions at Reid's silent command. You're sheriffs. Got sand, I'll give him that, Cooper snarled, shoving Sarah toward his men. Hawkins, watch her. Think it's time me and the law had us a real conversation. Tom tried shifting closer to the hidden gun compartment, but Scratchy Pete's rifle stopped him cold. Stay put, old man. Wilson stirred on the floor, consciousness returning. Dutch kicked him, drawing a pained groan. This one's waking up, Jake. Good. Cooper's face split in an ugly grin. Want him aware for what comes next? He turned back to the window. Hey, lawman, got something to show you. Reid's voice came back, steady as ever. Nothing you show me's gonna change how this ends, Cooper. Oh, I think it might. Cooper grabbed Wilson's hair, dragging him to his feet. The deputy's face was pale from blood loss, but his eyes were alert. See, way I figure it, you got yourself a choice. Either you back off nice and quiet like, or your boy here learns what a gut shot feels like. Sarah watched Cooper's crew shifting nervously. They'd crossed lines tonight they hadn't planned on, and reality was setting in. Scratchy Pete's hands shook on his rifle. Dutch kept glancing at the back door. Even Hawkins looked uncertain. Only Cooper seemed to be enjoying himself, high on violence and whiskey. Clock's ticking, Sheriff. What's it gonna be? Reid's response was measured, almost gentle. Son, you shoot that deputy. There won't be enough left of you to bury. Wrong answer. Cooper jammed his gun against Wilson's wound, making the deputy gasp. Maybe we need us a demonstration. Show folks what happens when... The sound of breaking glass cut him off. Sarah had slammed her bound hands into a whiskey bottle, sending shards and alcohol across the bar. In the confusion, Tom lunged for the hidden compartment. Cooper spun, shoving Wilson aside. Kill that old man. But Tom had reached his goal. The compartment flew open, and he came up with Reid's spare Colt. His first shot caught Dutch in the shoulder, spinning him into a table. His second went wide as Hawkins' rifle butt caught him in the back. Sarah drove her shoulder into Scratchy Pete, sending them both crashing into the bar. Her tied hands found another bottle, and she brought it down on his head with a crack that echoed through the saloon. Shoot them, Cooper roared, raising his gun toward Tom. Shoot them all! Outside, the sound of gunfire brought Reid into motion. Move in! Now! But Cooper was faster. He grabbed Sarah by the hair, yanking her up. His rage had crystallized into something cold and vicious. Far enough, old man, he told Tom, who still held the Colt despite blood running down his face. Drop it or I start breaking things. To emphasize his point, he seized Sarah's right hand, the crack of her fingers breaking cut through the chaos like a whip. Sarah didn't scream. Her eyes locked with Cooper's, and in them he saw something that made him hesitate, not fear but a promise of what was coming. Last mistake, she whispered through clenched teeth. He's going to kill you for that. He who? Your sheriff? Cooper laughed, but there was an edge of uncertainty now. Ain't nobody killing Jake Cooper, not today, not ever. Blood dripped onto sawdust as they faced each other in the lamp-lit saloon. Outside, Reid's voice rose above the night, issuing commands. Inside, Cooper's crew looked at their leader and saw a man coming apart at the seams. Time to show this whole damn town what real violence looks like, Cooper said, raising his gun. Starting with you, lady. Sarah Manning smiled through bloody lips. No, she said quietly. Time to show you why this is the wrong saloon, the wrong town, and definitely the wrong woman. The night was about to become very interesting indeed. Pain radiated from Sarah's broken fingers, but she forced it down, focusing instead on Cooper's increasingly unstable state. 7 years of working frontier saloons had taught her to read men like books. Cooper was unraveling, and that made him more dangerous than ever. You think you're real tough, she said, voice steady despite the pain. Breaking a woman's fingers, shooting an off-guard deputy. Real brave. Cooper's face twisted. Shut up. He jerked her closer, gun pressed to her ribs. Behind him, his crew was falling apart. Dutch clutched his bleeding shoulder. Scratchy Pete lay unconscious, and both Hawkins and Mike looked ready to bolt. Know what I think? Sarah continued, counting seconds, knowing Reid would be moving his men into position. Think you're scared. Think you know you've stepped in something you can't handle? Said shut up. Cooper's hand tightened on his gun. Outside, movements in the shadows told her Reid's men were getting closer. She just had to keep Cooper distracted. 7 years ago, she said, letting memory harden her voice. I came to Redemption Springs running from men like you. Sheriff Reid. Found me half dead on the trail. Know what he did? Cooper's eyes darted between her and the windows, sweat beading on his face despite the cool night air. His crew watched nervously as their leader's control visibly slipped. He didn't just save my life, Sarah continued. He gave me this saloon to manage. Taught me to shoot, to fight, to stand up to men who think breaking fingers makes them powerful. Her smile was razor sharp. Want to know what else he taught me? Don't matter none, Cooper snarled, but his voice shook slightly. Ain't getting out of this. Sarah leaned closer despite the pain it caused. Taught me that men like you, they always make the same mistake. They think hurting people makes them strong, makes them respected. Her eyes locked with his, but all it does is paint a target on their back. Tom still held Reid's Colt, though Hawkins' rifle kept him from using it. The old bartender's eyes never left Sarah, waiting for a signal. He'd seen her handle trouble before, knew she was playing for time. You've got one chance, Sarah told Cooper, one chance to walk out of here alive. Because right now you're standing in Thomas Reid's saloon, pointing a gun at someone he promised to protect. Her voice dropped lower. And Reid keeps his promises. All 27 of them. The number hit Cooper like a physical blow. Everyone knew about Reid's notches, the markers of men who'd crossed his line. For the first time, real fear flickered in Cooper's eyes. Shut up! He backhanded her again, splitting her lip further. Ain't scared of no sheriff, ain't scared of nobody. But his crew had heard the tremor in his voice. Dutch was already backing toward the rear door. Mike's gun had lowered slightly. They were coming apart, just as Sarah had planned. Jake, Hawkins said quietly, maybe you should shut your mouth. Cooper's gun swung toward his own man. All of you, bunch of yellow-bellied cowards. Sarah saw her chance. With Cooper's attention split, she drove her knee up, catching him in the groin. His gun went off, the bullet splintering the bar as he doubled over. Tom fired in the same instant, and Hawkins went down clutching his leg. Chaos erupted. Dutch and Mike bolted for the back door. Cooper recovered faster than Sarah expected, grabbing her broken fingers and squeezing. The pain nearly took her legs. Out from under her. Gonna kill you slow, he hissed, raising his gun. Then gonna kill your sheriff. Then gonna burn this whole damn town. A voice cut through the night like a steel blade. Cooper! Reid stood in the doorway, his Colt drawn. The sheriff's eyes took in the scene in an instant. Sarah's broken fingers, Wilson's blood on the floor, his people hurt by men who'd crossed the line. Take your hand off her, Reid said quietly, or the next sound you hear will be your own. Funeral bell. The night held its breath, waiting to see which way the blood would flow. Outside the Red Rock, Redemption Springs had come alive with urgent whispers and loaded guns. Doc Matthews worked from his office window, watching the saloon while preparing for casualties. Judge Henderson organized armed citizens, their rifles glinting in the moonlight. Reid's gonna kill him, Old Mason muttered, clutching his shotgun. Seen that look in his eyes before. Night the Carson gang tried taking the bank. Martha huddled with other townspeople behind the safety of the general store. Sarah saved my life last month, she said quietly, when those drovers got rough. She didn't have to, but she did. That's why Reid gave her the saloon, Mrs. Henderson added, her husband's derringer hidden in her skirts. After what happened in Tucson, said She needed a fresh start, somewhere safe. The sound of gunfire from inside the Red Rock made everyone flinch. Deputy Miller, newly arrived from the South Ranch, positioned his men carefully. 3 in Boot Hill already this year, he told his deputies, all put there by Reid for hurting his people. Man's got rules few understand until they break them. Inside his office, Doc Matthews heard Cooper's shot echo. His hand stayed steady as he laid out bandages and instruments. 7 years of patching up Reid's handiwork had taught him to be prepared. "Remember the Williams girl?" his assistant whispered. "From the Golden Spur? She's still hiding at the mission," said Cooper and his bunch. Said they... "Reid knows." Matthews cut him off. "Why you think he's been watching them since they rode in? Man's got a 6th sense for trouble." More shots rang out. The crowd tensed, but Reid had positioned them well. Everyone knew their part, knew what the sheriff expected. This wasn't their first siege. Towns changed, Judge Henderson observed. From his position, time was we'd all hide inside and let trouble burn itself out. Now look at us, armed, organized, ready. "That's Reid's doing," Mason replied. "Man believes in justice, but he believes in prevention more. Taught us all to stand together." Through the saloon's windows, they could see shadows moving, hear raised voices. Cooper's crew was fracturing. 2 had already slipped out the back, right into Deputy Miller's waiting arms. "Remember when Reid bought the Red Rock?" Mrs. Henderson asked. "Everyone thought he was crazy, sheriff owning a saloon. But look what he built it into. Respectable place, safe place. Sarah's the real miracle, though," Martha added. "Way she turned her life around, way she helps others do the same." Her voice hardened. "Cooper's going to pay for hurting her." More townspeople arrived, drawn by the commotion. The story spread in whispers. Cooper's violence, Wilson's shooting, Sarah's defiance, each telling added to the fury building in Redemption Springs. "Time was," Mason said quietly. "A woman like Sarah wouldn't have had a chance. Saloon girl running from trouble, town would have turned its back." "Times change," Judge Henderson replied. "Or maybe just the people in charge of keeping time." A scream from inside the saloon made everyone grip their weapons tighter. They all knew Sarah, knew her strength. Hearing her in pain, cut deep. "Reid's waiting too long," someone muttered. "No," Deputy Miller corrected. "He's giving them rope. Same as always, giving them a chance to choose right before he has to choose for them." Through the windows, they saw Cooper's unraveling, saw his crew's fear growing, saw Sarah, despite her pain, standing tall. "Woman's got iron in her spine," Doc Matthews observed. "Going to need it before this night's done." The town held its breath, watching their sheriff frame himself in the saloon doorway. His voice carried clearly, one last chance at redemption. They all knew what would happen when Cooper refused it. Time stretched like pulled taffy in the Red Rock's lamplit interior. Reid stood in the doorway, his Colt trained on Cooper with unwavering precision. Cooper's remaining men, Hawkins bleeding from Tom's shot, Mike frozen in indecision, watched their leader's sanity crumble. "Last warning," Reid said, voice soft as a rattler's whisper. "Let her go." Cooper's laugh had an edge of hysteria. "What, lawman? Gonna shoot through her?" His grip on Sarah tightened, using her as a shield. "Way I hear it, she means something to you. More than just a saloon manager, ain't she?" Sarah met Reid's eyes, saw the cold fury there. 7 years of trust passed between them in that glance. She gave him the slightest nod, telling him she was ready. "Mike," Reid called, never taking his eyes off Cooper. "Your partner Dutch is already in my jail. Scratchy Pete's going to hang for what he did in Texas. Time to choose your side." Mike's gun wavered. "Jake, maybe we should—" "Shut up," Cooper's voice cracked. "Anyone tries leaving, I kill them first." But Mike had seen something in Reid's stance, something that spoke of absolute certainty. His gun clattered to the floor. "I'm done, Jake. This ain't what I signed up for." "Coward." Cooper's gun swung toward his former friend. "Yellow-bellied snake." Sarah seized her moment. She drove her elbow back into Cooper's ribs, ignoring the explosion of pain from her broken fingers. The move caught him off guard, but he recovered faster than expected. His gun came down like a club, catching her temple. Tom fired from behind the bar, but Hawkins, despite his wounded leg, managed to shoot back. The old bartender ducked as splinters flew from the bar top. "Enough!" Cooper roared, jerking Sarah up by her hair. Blood ran down her face, but her eyes remained defiant. "Everyone shut up and listen. Here's what's gonna happen." "No." Reid's word cut through the chaos like a blade. "Here's what's happening. Mike, walk out that door. Hawkins, drop your gun. Cooper." His voice went even softer. "You've got 3 seconds to release her." Cooper's face twisted. "Or what, old man? What you gonna do that 20 years of lawmen ain't managed?" 1. Mike edged toward the door, hands raised. Outside, the town waited in tense silence. 2. Hawkins looked between his wounded leg and his gun, calculation clear on his face. "Don't you do it, Bill," Cooper snarled. "Don't you dare." Sarah felt Cooper's grip shift as he turned to threaten Hawkins. She caught Reid's eye again, saw him register the change in position. 3. Several things happened at once. Hawkins' gun hit the floor as he raised his hands. Mike bolted through the door, and Sarah, despite her injuries, drove her head back into Cooper's face with everything she had. The crack of his nose breaking was lost in the chaos that followed. Cooper staggered, his grip loosening just enough. Sarah twisted free, diving aside as Reid's Colt roared in the confined space. Cooper's return shot went wild as Reid's bullet took him in the shoulder. He crashed into a table, cursing and bleeding. "Kill. You!" he screamed, bringing his gun around. "Kill you all!" Reid's second shot never came, because Sarah, who'd rolled behind the bar, had found what she was looking for. Her left hand, the one without broken fingers, emerged holding the sawed-off shotgun they kept for serious trouble. "Cooper," she said, voice steady despite everything. "Drop it!" The wounded man stared at her, reality finally starting to penetrate his whiskey-soaked brain. On the floor, Wilson stirred, reaching for his fallen gun. Tom's Colt still covered Hawkins, and Reid. Reid hadn't moved, hadn't lowered his weapon, hadn't even blinked. "Last chance," Sarah told him, "but somehow I don't think you're smart enough to take it." Cooper's eyes darted between his opponents, looking for a way out. Finding none, something final broke in his expression. "To hell with all of you," he snarled, and brought his gun up one last time. Cooper's gun never cleared his holster. Reid's shot caught him square in the chest, spinning him back against the bar. But instead of falling, Cooper smiled, a terrible, knowing smile that changed everything. Finally, he wheezed, blood staining his shirt. "Been waiting for this." Sarah kept the shotgun trained on him, but something in his tone made her skin crawl. Tom felt it too, shifting his aim between Cooper and the windows. "Whole thing," Cooper coughed, red flecking his lips. "Whole thing was just to get your attention, Reid." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" Cooper's laugh turned into a wet cough. "You really think we came here random? Been planning this months?" His hand pressed against his wound, but the smile never left his face. "Remember Tucson, 7 years ago?" Sarah went cold. Nobody in Redemption Springs knew about Tucson except Reid. Nobody knew what had really happened there. "That's right." Cooper's eyes glittered with malice. "Your girl here, she didn't just run from trouble. She ran from my brother." He spat. "Blood. James Cooper, the man you killed helping her escape." Reid's expression didn't change, but Sarah saw his trigger finger tighten slightly. "James Cooper died in a fair fight." "Liar." Cooper's voice rose, strength coming from somewhere deep. "Shot him in the back while he slept. Sarah here knows the truth, don't you, girl? Tell him how my brother treated you. Tell him what kind of woman you really are." Outside, Deputy Miller noticed movement on the rooftops across the street. "Judge!" he hissed. "We got company." 20 men, Cooper grinned through bloody teeth. Been in town 3 days, waiting. You think my crew was just drunk cowboys? They were bait, getting your attention while my real boys got into position. Reid's mind raced, recalculating odds. The town's armed citizens were focused on the saloon, their backs exposed to the surrounding buildings. This was never about the saloon, Sarah realized, horror dawning. You wanted to trap the whole town, get everyone gathered in one place. Smart. A girl. Cooper's breathing was ragged, but his eyes burned with triumph. My brother's woman always was clever, until she betrayed him, ran to the law like a scared rabbit. Your brother was a monster. Sarah's voice shook with fury. He deserved what he got, maybe. Cooper's hand moved slightly, and Reid noticed something gleaming in his sleeve. But now everyone you love is gathered nice and tight. Perfect target for... His derringer appeared like magic, aimed not at Reid or Sarah, but at the barrel of lamp. Oil behind the bar. No! Sarah's shotgun roared, but Cooper had already pulled his trigger. The lamp oil exploded, sending burning liquid cascading across the bar. Flames leaped up the walls as Cooper's hidden men opened fire from the rooftops, targeting the crowd below. Ambush! Reid's voice cut through the chaos. Everyone take cover! Inside the saloon, Sarah and Tom scrambled away from the spreading fire. Cooper lay dead, his final smile still fixed on his face. But his real plan was just beginning. Through the smoke and flames, Sarah heard screaming from the street. Cooper's hidden men had the high ground, perfect position to rain death on the trapped townspeople below. 7 years, she whispered, remembering. James Cooper's cruelty. 7 years, and his brother never stopped hunting. Reid grabbed her arm. Sarah, listen. There's something else you need to know about Tucson. Something I never told you. But before he could finish, a new sound cut through the gunfire. Horses, dozens of them, thundering into town from the north. Right on time. Cooper's corpse seemed to mock them from the floor. My brother had more friends than just me. And they've all been waiting for this night. The trap wasn't just sprung. It was worse than anyone had imagined. Flames climbed the Red Rock's walls as Reid dragged Sarah toward the rear door. Tom and Hawkins helped Wilson, the wounded deputy finding strength in desperation. Outside, the night had erupted into war. The mission, Reid ordered, his voice carrying over the chaos. Get everyone to the mission. Stone walls, defensible position. Deputy Miller's voice rang out, directing townspeople through the alleys. Cooper's men on the rooftops kept firing, but their advantage was already slipping as the crowd dispersed into smaller groups. Reid. Sarah grabbed his arm with her good hand. What didn't you tell me about Tucson? About James Cooper? A bullet splintered the doorframe between them. Reid fired back, dropping a shadow from the roof of the general store. Later, first we... No! Sarah stood her ground despite the danger. 7 years I've trusted you. 7 years running from a past I thought was dead. If you know something I need to know now. The approaching thunder of hooves grew louder. Reid made his decision. James Cooper wasn't just a cruel man, he said, checking his ammunition. He was connected. His gang had roots in every territory, and from Texas to California. When I killed him, he met her eyes. I started a war. Sarah's face went pale. The men who are coming, his old crew, his friends, everyone who ever rode with the Cooper gang. Reid's expression hardened. They're not here just for revenge. They want to send a message. Show every lawman what happens when you cross their kind. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. The whole town. Everyone's in danger because of me. No. Reid's voice was iron. Because of men who think they can rule through fear. Because of choices I made. His hand touched her shoulder. I'd make them again. A new voice called from the alley. Sheriff, we got women and children headed for the mission, but Rogers saw at least 30 riders approaching from the north. Reid nodded. Martin, get Sarah to... I'm staying. Sarah's left hand held Tom's borrowed, Colt steady despite her broken fingers. My past brought this fight here. I won't run from it again. Through the smoke, they could see Cooper's rooftop men repositioning, trying to keep the town pinned down. But Redemption Springs wasn't dying easily. Judge Henderson had organized a group of riflemen, keeping the attackers honest. Deputy Miller was coordinating a fighting retreat, moving people to safety with practiced efficiency. 7 years, Sarah said quietly. 7 years you've been preparing for this, training the town, organizing defenses. You knew they'd come eventually. Reid didn't deny it, wanted the town ready. Just didn't expect Jake Cooper to be clever enough to set a trap this good. The thundering hooves were closer now. Through the flames consuming the Red Rock, Sarah could see the life she'd built here starting to burn as well. But something else was burning too. Something that had started in Tucson 7 years ago when she'd first decided to stop being a victim. "Tom!" she called to the old bartender. "Remember that cache under the floorboards? The one Reid had us keep stocked?" Tom's weathered face creased in a fierce grin. Winchester rifles. Enough ammunition for a small war. Good. Sarah checked. Her borrowed Colt. Because that's exactly what we've got coming. Reid studied her face, saw the same steel there he'd recognized 7 years ago. "Your fingers are broken. You can barely hold that gun." "Then I'll use my left hand." Her eyes met his. "You saved me in Tucson, gave me a home, a purpose, a chance at a real life." She turned toward the approaching sound of horses. Time to return the favor. The night was far from over, and Redemption Springs was about to show the Cooper gang exactly what kind of town they'd picked a fight with. The mission's stone walls glowed orange in the light of the burning Red Rock. Inside, Doc Matthews worked furiously, patching wounds while Sarah helped organize the town's defense. Her broken fingers were splintered now, but she refused laudanum, needing her mind clear. 34 rifles, Tom reported, finishing his count of the emergency cache they'd retrieved. Plus whatever the townspeople brought, maybe 60 guns total. Against what? Judge Henderson asked Reid. The sheriff's voice was grim. Rogers counted 30 riders approaching, plus Cooper's 15 on the rooftops. Figure 50 men, all told. Professional gun hands. Sarah studied the mission's layout. The stone walls were solid, the windows narrow, but they were surrounded and their ammunition wouldn't last forever. "We've got wounded to protect," she said, nodding toward where Wilson and others lay under Doc Matthews's care. "And children." Reid's eyes met hers. "Got a back way out through the cellars. Tunnels lead to the creek bed." His meaning was clear. They could still evacuate the vulnerable. "They'll be watching for that," Sarah replied. Cooper's brother was thorough. Jake wouldn't have missed planning for escape routes. Outside, the approaching riders had stopped just beyond rifle range. Their leader's voice carried clearly through the night. "Reid, send out the girl, and we'll let the town stand." Sarah's hand tightened on her borrowed Colt. She recognized that voice. Carson Cooper, the eldest brother, the worst of them all. "You know that's a lie," she told Reid. "They'll burn everything no matter what we do." Reid nodded. "Never intended to give you up anyway." He turned to the gathered townspeople. "Anyone who wants to try the tunnels, now's the time. No shame in it. Rest of you, this is going to get bad." But not a single person moved toward the cellar. These were frontier folk who'd built something worth defending. They'd faced drought, disasters, and outlaws before. They weren't running. "Now, got movement on the roofs," Deputy Miller reported. "They're setting up something. Oh, Christ. They've got dynamite." Sarah's mind raced. The mission walls would stand against rifles, but explosives were another matter. They needed a plan. Her eyes fell on the mission's bell tower. "Tom, that cache under the floorboards. Was the buffalo gun still there?" The old bartender grinned. "Sharps, 50-90. Enough reach to make those roof rats think twice." Reid caught her thinking. Henderson's boy Luke is our best shot with a long gun. Get him up there with someone to spot." He turned to the judge. "Sir, I know he's young, but—" "Boy's been shooting since he could walk," Henderson replied. "He'll do what needs doing." Sarah directed the placement of defenders, her years of managing the saloon, translating smoothly to organizing people in crisis. Every window was manned, every approach covered. If the Cooper gang wanted a war, they'd get one. "You should be the one to leave," Reid told her quietly. "None of this was your fault, no matter what Carson Cooper claims." Sarah checked her guns, load, then met his eyes. "7 years ago, I let them make me a victim, drive me from my home, take everything I was." Her voice hardened. "Never again. This is my town, too. My people. My fight." Outside, Carson Cooper's voice rose again. "Last chance, Reid, send her out, or we start reducing your fine town to splinters." Reid's hand found Sarah's good one, squeezed once. No more words were needed. They'd both made their choices 7 years ago in Tucson. Now it was time to face the consequences together. The storm was about to break, and Redemption Springs would either stand or fall as one. The first stick of dynamite arced through the darkness like a falling star. Luke Henderson tracked it with the Sharp's rifle, his young face set in concentration. 15 degrees left, his spotter whispered. "Wait for the throw." The buffalo. Gun roared. The dynamite carrier pitched backward off the roof, his deadly package falling among his own men. The explosion lit up the night, screams following in its wake. "Good shot," Sarah said into the sudden silence. "Make them think twice about trying that again." But Carson Cooper had more plans than explosives. Torches flew next, setting fire to the buildings surrounding the mission. The Cooper gang was systematically cutting off any possibility of retreat. "They're burning our homes," Martha whispered, watching her family's store catch fire. "Homes can be rebuilt," Sarah replied, her splintered fingers reminding her of everything else that could heal. "People can't." Reid moved through the defenders, checking positions, offering quiet words of encouragement. He paused beside Sarah at the main window. "Carson's playing this smart," he said softly. "Containing us, wearing us down. Like his brother would have." Sarah's voice was steel. "But James made a mistake in Tucson. Know what it was?" Reid raised an eyebrow. He thought breaking people meant they stayed broken. She checked her gun again. He was wrong. Outside, Carson Cooper's men had formed a loose circle around the mission. Occasional shots kept the defenders pinned, but they weren't pressing hard yet. They could afford to wait. "Sheriff," Deputy Miller called urgently. "Riders coming in from the south." Every gun turned toward the new threat. Through the flame-lit darkness, horses approached at a gallop, but instead of more outlaws, they saw something else. Badges glinting in the firelight. "U.S. Marshals," Reid breathed. "Must have seen the fires." Sarah's hope died as Carson's voice rang out again. "Let 'em through, boys. They're with us." The approaching lawmen pulled up alongside Cooper's gang. Their leader, a broad-shouldered man with a marshal's star, dismounted casually. "That's Marcus Hawkins," Reid's voice was grim. "Carson's got badges in his pocket. Has for years." Sarah remembered stories about James Cooper's connections, how he'd corrupted lawmen across 3 territories. Now those same corrupt badges were here to help his brothers take revenge. "Town surrounded, Reid," Marshal Hawkins called out. "Got 40 more men blocking the pass north. Nobody's coming to help." Inside the mission, people shifted nervously. Corrupt lawmen changed everything. Even if they survived the night, who could they appeal to for justice? "Listen to me," Sarah raised her voice. "All of you. What they want isn't just revenge. They want to break us. Show everyone that law doesn't matter, that men like them will always win." She moved among the defenders, meeting eyes, touching shoulders, with her good hand. "But we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for every town that needs to believe good people can stand up to men like this." Reid watched her with pride. This was the woman he'd seen in Tucson. Not a victim, but a leader. Someone who could inspire others to find their own strength. "They're moving something up," Tom called from his position. "Looks like hell. They've got a cannon, military surplus." Sarah's mind raced. A cannon would bring down even the mission's stone walls. They were out of time for inspiration. They needed action. "Luke," she called to the young sniper. "How many shots you got left for that buffalo gun?" "6, he replied. "Make 'em count." She smiled grimly. "Oh yes, but first," she turned to Reid, "remember what you did in Tucson, when James had us cornered in the bank?" Reid's eyes lit with understanding. "Crazy then, crazier now." But it worked. She faced the gathered defenders. "I need volunteers. 6 people crazy enough to try something that probably won't work." Hands raised immediately. These people had fought too hard to give up now. Outside, Carson Cooper's voice rose one final time. "Get that cannon in position. Time to show these fine folks what happens when they stand against the Cooper family." Sarah checked her gun, then met Reid's eyes. "Ready to finish what we started in Tucson?" The sheriff's smile was wolf-like. "Been ready for 7 years. The point of no return had arrived. Time to show the Cooper gang exactly what kind of people they were dealing with." The cannon's black mouth gaped at the mission like a promise of doom. Carson Cooper stood behind it, orchestrating his men's positions with the precision that had made him the most dangerous of the brothers. "Sight it in," he ordered. "Want those walls to come down all at once." Inside, Sarah led her volunteers through the mission's cellar. Reid's presence at her back was steady as a heartbeat as they moved through the darkness. "Remember Tucson," she whispered. "They'll be watching the tunnel exit, expecting runners, not fighters." Tom checked his shotgun. 6 of us against 50 of them. Good odds. "Better than the cannon giving us," Martha replied grimly. Judge Henderson and Deputy Miller made up the rest of their group, each carrying extra ammunition and determination. Above, Luke Henderson waited with the buffalo gun, watching for Sarah's signal. The rest of the townspeople maintained their positions, keeping Cooper's men focused on the mission's front. "Getting awful quiet in there," Carson called out. "Last chance to send out the girl, Reid. Save your people a lot of pain." Sarah reached the tunnel's exit, hidden in a dry creek bed. As expected, 4 of Cooper's men stood guard, rifles ready. "Now, Luke," she breathed into the night. The buffalo gun's roar split the darkness. The cannon's powder cart exploded, sending men flying. In the same instant, Sarah's team erupted from the creek bed. Tom's shotgun took 2 guards before they could turn. Martha and the judge provided covering fire while Sarah, Reid, and Miller sprinted for the buildings behind Cooper's men. "Behind us!" someone shouted. "They're behind!" Reid's Colt cut him off. 7 years of waiting, of preparing, had led to this moment. Each shot found its mark as they pushed through the enemy line. Carson Cooper's voice rose in rage. "Kill them!" "Kill them all." But his men were caught in confusion. The defenders in the mission opened fire, pinning down anyone who tried to respond. Luke's buffalo gun kept the rooftop teams suppressed. Sarah's broken fingers screamed as she fired her borrowed gun left-handed, but each shot counted. They reached the general store's back door, gaining the high ground Carson's men had held moments before. "Like Tucson," Reid said, taking position beside her, "except this time we've got help." Martha proved his point, her rifle dropping a man trying to rush their position. Judge Henderson and Miller set up a crossfire, while Tom's shotgun kept anyone from approaching the stairs. But Carson Cooper hadn't survived this long by being easily rattled. "Burn them out," he ordered. "Burn every building. Send this whole damn town to hell." Torches flew. Buildings already weakened by the earlier fires began to collapse, the night filled with smoke and flame. 7 years. Carson's voice carried over the chaos. 7 years since you killed my brother, took his woman, made us look weak. His next words dripped venom. Been planning this ever since. Every detail, every angle. Sarah lined up her sights on his voice. Should have planned better. Her shot caught him in the shoulder, spinning him into view. For the first time, she saw his face clearly, so like James's, twisted with the same cruel hatred. "You're right about one thing," she called out. 7 years is a long time, long enough to stop being afraid, long enough to learn how to fight back. The battle turned vicious. Cooper's men, realizing they'd lost their advantage, fought with desperate fury. But Sarah's team had the high ground, and the mission's defenders kept up their pressure. Marshal Hawkins tried rallying his corrupt lawman for a charge. Luke's buffalo gun ended that plan, the heavy bullet taking him clean out of his saddle. "It's over, Carson," Reid's voice cut through the gunfire. "Your brother died alone in Tucson. You want the same?" Carson Cooper's response was a burst of gunfire. "Only thing dying tonight is this town, everything you built, everyone you tried to protect." But his men were falling back. Their coordinated attack collapsed into pockets of resistance. The mission's defenders began pushing out, gaining ground foot by bloody foot. Sarah spotted movement, Carson making a break for the stables. "He's running!" "No." Reid's voice was iron. "This ends tonight." Together, they moved through the smoke and flame, following the man who'd brought war to their home. Behind them, Redemption Springs fought for its life. The final confrontation was coming, and this time there would be no more running. Smoke from the burning buildings turned the stables into a maze of shifting shadows. Sarah moved carefully, her broken fingers throbbing with each heartbeat. Reid flanked her left, his Colt tracking every movement. A horse screamed in panic. Gunfire erupted from behind a stall. Reid pulled Sarah down as splinters flew from the post beside her head. "Almost got her that time, didn't I?" Carson's voice echoed. "Just like old times, Sarah. You running, me hunting, just like with James." "Not running now," Sarah called back, using his voice to track his position. "Haven't run from a Cooper in 7 years." More shots. Closer this time. Carson was trying to work around their flank. Outside, the sounds of battle were dying down. The town was winning, but at a terrible cost. "You know what James's last words were?" Carson's voice dripped venom. "When your sheriff shot him in his sleep." "He wasn't sleeping," Reid responded, moving silently toward the voice. "He was drunk, beat Sarah half to death, then passed out celebrating. Remember that part?" A horse kicked its stall in panic. Sarah caught movement, a shadow against shadows. She fired, heard Carson curse as her bullet found something. "You're hit," she said, "bleeding, no way out. Give up while you can still stand trial." Carson's laugh was ugly. "Trial? In what court? With what judge? I own the law in 3 territories. Everything you built here, every safe haven you thought you made, it all burns tonight." "Wrong." Sarah's voice was steel. "You don't own anything. Anymore. Your brother's empire died with him in Tucson. You're just too stupid to know it." The next shots came from above. Carson had reached the hayloft. Reid shoved Sarah aside as bullets stitched the ground where she'd stood. 7 years! Carson was screaming now. 7 years planning this revenge. Every detail, every moment. "Then you should have planned better." The new voice came from behind Carson. Tom stood in the hayloft door, shotgun leveled. The old bartender had circled around while Sarah and Reid kept Carson talking. Carson spun, firing wildly. Tom's shotgun roared in the confined space. The eldest Cooper brother staggered, his gun falling. But even wounded, he managed one last, desperate act. Deed. Lantern in his hand, shattered against a hay bale. Fire erupted instantly, racing up the dry straw. "If I burn," Carson snarled, blood on his lips. "Everyone burns." Sarah's shot took him in the chest. Carson Cooper fell from the hayloft, landing hard on the stable floor. But he was still smiling, even as his life bled out. "Too late," he wheezed. "Stables connect to every building left standing. Fire's gonna take it all." Reid's expression hardened. One shot ended Carson's smile forever. Tom, Sarah called up. Get out the back. The roof creaked ominously. Fire was spreading faster than seemed possible. Carson's last plan was working. The stables would carry flame to every surviving structure. Sarah, Reid's voice was urgent. Remember what I said about choices, about doing it all again. She met his eyes through the thickening smoke, understood suddenly what he meant to do. No, she grabbed his arm. Together or not at all. The roof began to collapse. Tom's voice shouted from outside, calling others to help, but the fire was too hot, too fast. Reid looked at Sarah, really looked at her. Saw not the saloon girl he'd saved in Tucson, but the warrior she'd become. His next words came hard. You're right. Together. They moved as one, finding the stable's water pump. Sarah's broken fingers screamed as they worked the handle. Reid stripped off his coat, soaking it. On 3, he said. Sarah nodded. Just like Tucson. They charged into the flames, wet coat held between them. The fire tried claiming them, but they pushed through, following the stable's central beam. If they could break the connection to other buildings. Outside, the town watched in horror as the stables became an inferno. But they also saw something else. 2 figures moving with desperate purpose, fighting to save what they'd built. Together. One last time. Dawn broke over Redemption Springs, painting the smoke-filled sky in shades of gold and crimson. The stable's flames had been contained thanks to Sarah and Reid's desperate gambit. They'd emerged scorched but alive, having broken the fires. Path to the surviving buildings. Now Sarah stood in the Red Rock's ruins, her splintered fingers gentle on the charred bar top. 7 years of memories in ashes, but something else had risen from them, something stronger. Buildings still sound, Tom said, examining the walls. Foundation solid, could rebuild, make it better than before. Just like everything else, Martha added, cleaning soot from her rifle. The young woman looked different now, tempered by fire into something harder. Reid appeared in the doorway, his shadow falling across the burned floor. Carson's men are rounded up, the ones that survived. Judge Henderson's already wired the territorial capital about those corrupt marshals. Sarah turned to face him, seeing past the bandages and burns to the man who'd saved her twice now. Once in Tucson, once here, but this time she'd saved him too. 7 years, she said quietly. 7 years waiting for the past to catch up. Now what? Reid's smile was gentle. Now we rebuild. Together. Through the broken windows, they could see the town stirring to life. Neighbors helping neighbors, clearing debris, making plans. The Cooper gang had tried to destroy Redemption Springs, but instead had only revealed its true strength. Won't be easy, Tom observed. Lot of work ahead. Sarah flexed her broken fingers, feeling the pain, but also the promise of healing. Nothing worth doing ever is. The sun climbed higher, burning away the smoke, showing their town scarred but undefeated. Sarah Manning, once a saloon girl running from her past, stood tall among people who'd fought beside her, who'd believed in her. No, she said. I think the Red Rock could use a new sign when we rebuild. Something about rising from ashes. Reid's hand found hers, careful of her injuries. Think that's a story worth telling? Sarah looked at their joined hands, then at the town beyond, her home, her people, her future. Oh yes, that's a story. Worth telling indeed. The past had finally burned itself out. What remained was a new dawn and the promise of tomorrow.